Excellent, and welcome to TED Summit. We have a sponsors keynote with Thomas, the man behind vCon, which had a storming TED hack. Oh my, amazing number and excellent hacks. So
Thank you so much.
congratulations, Thomas, and looking forward to your keynote presentation.
I thank you so much. And so I'm really happy to give this keynote conversation here. It was Alan, you gave me the title for it, which was the rise and rise of vCons. And we did start them here,
Yeah.
right? This was the birthing place of
Yeah.
of the vCons. And so what I wanted to do was do something I haven't done. This is a new one for me. I wanted to just go back and see what's happened
Yes.
since we've started this, and to see where we started and where it's really going, and how you can see, the
Yeah.
rise and rise of vCons.
Exactly.
No better place to have it. So let's dive. Ready?
Yep. Go for it.
Oh, okay, here we go. Well, let's see here. I gotta start my presentation box.
Oh yeah. I know. Yeah, it's the share button. That's it. You're
Uh,
good.
that's right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, well, there we go. So again, as I said, I'm really happy to be here and to give this presentation here for you. If this isn't, the nest of the vCons, there isn't one. And so I thought it would be kind of fun to go back and really just put a finger on the moments that brought us here. And so it all started at Strawled. You've heard of Strawled quite a bit, and I'll tell you a little bit more. Strawled is a company that helps people purchase cars. We work on behalf of car dealerships in North America, only new car dealers. And we decided that listening to customers was really important, but we knew that we weren't really doing it. And so the vCons came out of our efforts to really try to really listen and understand what those conversations had for us. And that was kind of like the spark of the vCon idea. This is the earliest picture I can find that has the word vCon in it. And so this is back when we were trying to like go, you know what? What is a vCon? Why does it matter? And from the really early days, we kind of got this idea that it was like not just the conversation, but it was more than that. And it was sort of funny how, we came to understand different parts differently. Like identity, I think, was more important earlier, and then not as important as we got to the IETF, becoming important again. So
Hmm.
that's an interesting sort of like, loop in the arc.
Yeah.
Um, and funny thing, the analysis is all about being angry, right? So let's keep on with it. So as you remember, what we did was we had this first keynote about vCons. It was in 2021. It
Yeah.
was almost 3 years ago, and I definitely look younger, although I think I also look crazier. I don't know why you picked that one of all the things you could. And
It's
and
action. It's an action shot.
it's an action thing. Well, so this was part of our work uh, on a white paper, right?
Hmm.
Which
Yep.
I think needs another draft, right? I think we should really go back and do that.
Yeah.
And I didn't really want to put the white paper here on the screen, but let me just say that if you were to print out the white paper and then stand upon it, you would not survive the fall, right? You have to answer in the afterlife for your ecological damage for printing out that white
Oh
paper.
yeah. Well, we had to make the case for containers. We
And
needed
didn't we ever? I
containers.
mean, like, what was really obvious after the white paper, and this was like, oh my God, there's a thousand ways of doing this,
Exactly.
and and finally, we think we found, our path, to being launched here out of the TAD community. And so we really started to understand, not only what vCon was in really better detail, but also the place where we thought it was going to be, accepted the best, which is the IETF. And boy, was that a good choice for us. And that was really, really, I think, really smart in all of our points. I think the fact that we did the white paper and we had Mitch and Paul and Eric and you and we have a lot of really and a lot of people really had a lot of respect. Had a lot of respect. Really got I think the IETF to pay attention, which is really
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. And I think we also began to understand that the big thing about a vCon is that it's protecting of digital rights. It's
Yes.
as much as a governance rights solution as it is anything, and to really to enable the interchange of conversations requires it. And I think, fine fine time for that. So, and the first business case that we had that I thought was a go was this analysis documents processing activities. So basically, what in a vCon, every time you process the information, you keep track of it, right? Remember this?
Yeah, I
Uh,
do.
right, and because you're able to do that, you can enable the audit log of where your personal data went, right?
Yep.
Which which ends up being, I think, in the long run, being one of the most important things here, because I think then, and I think I'm convinced myself now that there's going to be an enduring need to train AI on customer conversations directly,
Yeah.
right? There are real-time situations where RAG isn't fast enough, and who I think it's a good assumption.
Yep.
The problem is that you can't do that because what's going to happen when the customer decides to revoke their consent?
Yep.
This is the use case which, if you use vCons, you can train and create AI based upon, that, but do it in a way which is ethical and compliant. And I
Yes.
think the first ones we thought about was going to be, we have to do this because we remember that back then, I'm not sure what it is now, but to train a model, remember that last thing of GPT
Yeah.
required as much electricity as you would find in a boxcar full of coal.
Yep. Yep.
I
That's
remember those days.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then what happened was, the IETF relented. And again, thank God, we're in the art area. The applications in real time. We've had a lot of great, support from leaders in our industry, like Jonathan Rosenberg, who's been very, very supportive to us, and Colin Jennings, and even Ecker has been, a good guy through this. And so we finally got that working group, and that was, for us, just the most amazing thing. To know that, a group of this stature would actually
Yeah.
think about, supporting vCons. And so so here maybe we started to think, hey, maybe vCons will be a thing, right? And this is when we started thinking maybe there's a little bit of a rise here. The start of the rise. I got a business case. I got a standards body that cares. I'm like, okay,
Yes.
not bad. Not so bad.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. But things lead to things, right? So when we started this vCon thing, right? If you remember all the way back then for the crazy guy like this stuff, we never even talked about was what we found at the IETF and SCITT.
Yeah.
And that became really interesting. And Alistair Woodman, the guy who introduced me to the SCITT group. Oh, by the way, Kenji, before I do that, I want to say this again. I don't say it nearly enough. That Dan Petrie, my co-author on this standard, kicked ass. He did such a good job as a co-author. So much of the really gnarly networking things inside the vCon came straight from him. Couldn't have done it without Dan, and
Yeah.
I just want to share that. And that, I think a lot of what we've done here is duets, like working together, and me and you, and this is me and Dan. And I think
Oh
Dan
yeah.
did
That's
such a
cool.
great job with that. You know, okay, but none of those things are about SCITT, right? So as we're going up, we find SCITT. If you haven't heard about SCITT, you're going to.
Yep. Next presentation.
Next presentation. And what SCITT allows you to do is have this indelible marker around what happens in the world, specifically around what happens to vCons. And that allows something that we've always kind of wanted with this, which was the ability for regulators and auditors to be able to know what happened to your data and then to manage that appropriately,
Yeah.
right? Um, that um, that turns out to also have another really interesting quality to it, which is uh, not only do we know, what happened to it, we know who made it. And because we know who made it, that actually becomes important for other reasons.
Yeah.
Now, because we can now do SCITT and we can manage these kinds of the parties and in a very efficient way, now companies don't have to make this argument around how it's difficult to manage your personal data. It's not.
Yeah.
Now, this is the way you would do it, and it's not so hard. And you can even have people take care of their own, personal rights.
Hmm.
Have to even have a person. It should be zero cost to you. Enter the guy's phone number, enter the guy's, email, and we'll tell you what we know about you. And then you can manage it.
Yeah.
All now done because of SCITT and vCons. Right? It becomes a much more manageable, realizable thing. So, boy, that's pretty good. We went from documents to global AI governance,
Yes.
right? Not so bad. And that's the rise and the raw. We have like a little few more letters to go.
Oh
But
yeah.
we're
Oh
but
yeah.
then,
We're getting
okay. And then
there.
then then because of SCITT and because you know who made it and you can like sign it and you can't unsign it, you can actually expose fakes by authenticating the real.
Hmm.
So the very same way we manage the differences between secured and unsecured websites, we can secure and unsecure vCons. Where would you trust an unsecured website? Well, you might, but good luck to you.
Yeah.
Because vCons are tamper-proof and they're on top of SCITT, what they allow you to do is a good start against deepfakes.
Yeah.
Because there's no difference between a faked video or a faked software bomb. They're both inputs into processing.
Yeah.
And this is like the favorite picture. This is one of these pictures of me is real. One of these pictures of me is fake. Can you tell? Right? And the joke because both Alan and I grew up on islands, right? We're both
Yeah.
islanders. So of course, because I'm an islander, you know that it's me because I have 6 fingers on that hand because of all the island inbreeding.
Genetically undiverse.
Very undiverse. Okay, so now here's the crazy thing. So this is one that we didn't see coming either. So, all that stuff here, all the stuff way back in the day here when we're crazy and that stuff, no ChatGPT yet, right?
Nope.
None, right? And that made this argument much harder to say, hey, we need to pay attention to this to the robots that aren't here yet.
Yeah.
But boy, did they show up, right?
Yeah.
So, but look what happened. And this is really rising now. This is like, yeasty. So in this case, they trained the LLMs on publicly available data like Wikipedia, and they tried Reddit, and they have to pay for it, but they don't have to pay for IETF specs,
Yeah.
which is why you can ask Claude or any robot you want to write you some code that's network code.
Yeah.
Not so hard. And guess what? They've been trained on vCons. They know what a vCon is. They know what it's for. They read the white paper, right? They're not going to watch this, and they got the spec. And so now the robots speak vCons natively. That was easy. And I didn't see that one coming. Who thought about that was going to happen? So now we get a vCon to a conversation is really nice and perfect because it knows what it's saying. See, rising,
Mhm.
right? And then and then we have some really interesting applications that are coming out that really I think everyone's kind of nuts about. Here's a really good one. This is something we're doing at Strawled called Strawled GPT. And basically what it's doing is it is giving you the ability to use vCons to understand your business. So you take the vCons that you generate between you and the other um, and your customers, so customer and agent conversations, so you can kind of see the business and you give it to ChatGPT and you ask questions
Yeah.
about not just the customers, not just your employees, but the business. Like who's been interested in driving cars and kind of write them an email back. It really allows you to really understand and manage your business in a crazy way you weren't able to before.
Yeah.
And we're rising. And here the beacons are rising more, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then 2 weeks ago, we had Mitch Lieberman who stood up in Boston Public Library and started talking about conversational CRMs. And this is a wonderful idea around how we can really manage the intersection between these conversations and the data which they contain. And this is an interesting way of doing it with Rosie the robot. So basically, you have a CRM, doesn't matter which one it is. And before you have a phone call with the customer, or maybe as the customer is coming inbound, you have a robot that looks at the CRM and says, what data is missing? What data is wrong? What do I have to ask? And it generates call notes to the agent. Now, by the way, that agent being a Viking is actually an empathetic moment because he's a very sensitive Viking. I don't mean to like imply that our agents are Vikings, except that they're sensitive people.
Yeah.
So the sensitive Viking goes, "Hey, I forgot to ask you when your birthday was," and the customer goes, "That's April 1st, free beer." So that is captured in the vCon to be processed by Rosie after the conversation to insert the transcription and update the birthday. And what does it do? It eliminates call wrap-up times for the agent. It keeps the data in the CRM correct. And it's a much better customer experience. So and that's just one of the really interesting, next generation applications that are out there. Um, uh, but it gets better. And so our second, major document in the vCon world has been submitted by Diana James, a
Mhm.
lawyer at Marshall and Donahue, which is a privacy primer for vCon developers. And basically, it's a nomenclature of what you need to understand, and what the issues are as a developer, because now we're upskilling and professionalizing
Yeah.
our developers because there's going to be a lot more. See all the vCon mashups that we had?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
yeah.
did. It was
Well,
like,
I mean, let's face it, the shrine at the temple of computing. Who would have thought vCon plays a role? And it most definitely does.
straight up to the top.
Yeah.
Straight up to the top. So that is like just a quick, here is here's where our lovely vCons have been over over our time. So I'll stop sharing. And I think that was for me looking over that.
Yeah.
It was really nice to see, you
Oh,
know.
yeah. Well, I think part of it is you've been part of TEDx for several years, and it shows it takes time. People have to, know about it. They need time to, start mashing it up in new ways. Because let's face it, you can see when we started, it was all around CRM use cases. That was really, I mean, we were talking generally around the category of container and doing analogies to say, look, this is an important category. It's standardized in all these other industries. We really should have got, our act together and standardized it in telecom. And that was the point, is to say we really should get our act together. And everybody sort of went, well, yes, of course, we should do it. Because we were able to show so many other industries that and the economic benefits that have come from that. And now it's this TED hack for me. Everybody said, okay, vCon, I've hacked on it before. Maybe, I don't know. But because they'd hacked on it before, because it was now familiar, they started using it in ways that were unfamiliar.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, 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 yes. And I was trying to like, find like the categories. Now there's different categories of econ applications. Like there's the tool category,
Yes.
beautiful tools, right? The
Yep.
customer segmentation category. So I'm taking custom. I'm like, by the way, I hope that RJ Burnham's going to watch this because one was named after his company, Conseg.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Yeah.
That was. And and then to see the fun.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of fun, work. But the two winners we had were both really, really impressive,
Yeah.
in their,
Oh,
in
yeah.
their
Brian was an excellent one. And then we had Steve or Maki Keek mashing up not only vCon, but also having skit elements in there as well. So, I mean,
yeah.
he just knocked it out of the park.
It was great. It was totally good. It was 100% great.
Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
Brian was from Kenya. So again, it's showing
Yeah.
all these hackers from all around the world coming together and doing some really impressive stuff.
You know what? The next generation is not constrained by our junk.
Exactly. 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
So
So thank
where's vCon going then?
it's it's going everywhere. I mean, and that's some of the craziest stuff. I mean, like we've got people who've came to us looking for digital rights solutions, DRM solutions,
Yeah.
music. I Who thought about that one? There's a lot of great carrier use cases,
Yeah.
contact center use cases,
Yeah.
new revenue streams,
Oh yeah.
churn reducers.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
it's Yeah, it's not quite like a transistor, but man, it seems like it's going to be in everything.
Yeah. But well, I think the thing that I think when we first were sort of communicating vCon to developers, people were like, well, where's the API? Very much give me the API and then I'll work out what to do with it. And we're like, well, it's not like that, you know?
It is really kind of funny. When's the last time you heard of a new file format?
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
kind of old school.
I
But I
know.
don't mind that.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Yeah. But again, people had
Oh,
to get
yeah.
over that, hurdle in understanding. And then, and I think one year, there was a lot more sort of competition from other sponsors' resources. So it ended up with just one, I think, hack from Matt Williams, because he got in and understood it. It's a file format. We need to do this. We need to do this. And he produced a really powerful example. And then, yeah, I just compare to that first of time we did a vCon hack to now, where it's almost like, 90% of the hacks were vCon because people just get it and are
But
applying it in lots of different ways, which I think is very powerful.
and you know what? And getting back to the transistor idea for a second, the easier it is.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
That's
But
what makes it not.
it's not any easier than when we first communicated. It's just people are more familiar.
Mhm.
So it's not like there's this big barrier. It's they've seen it before and then they realize, oh yeah, it's just a file format. And I can, put, sort of experiences into this file format and re-experience that experience wherever I am. Well, that's back to the shrine at the Temple of Computing. But yeah, yeah, it was great. It really was. Steve, you've
Well,
been quiet there. Do you have any questions or points you'd like to make?
No, I was just listening in and really enjoying working with Thomas, and he's been a great partner. He's been a great
so many
advocate.
duets. I mean, so many duets. I mean, like, that's what's really come down to, it's been, I mean, wow. I think, I feel like, SIP found its RTP, and vCons and SCITT are the same way. It's just, they make so much sense together.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And, and thank God for the IETF to give people who think about these things an opportunity to, like, I'm not sure about you guys, but when I'm at a birthday party, I never meet a protocol designer. At once.
Yeah, I'm just trying. Yeah, I don't know. If when it's the kids, you might do,
If someone told you they were, you'd be like,
Yeah. Oh dear. So no, this was great. And it yeah, when I was creating the title, it was just like, the rise and rise, because you've had all these events. So it was that's what drove me. But then your presentation eloquently captured, all those big events that have happened.
looking backwards. I never look backwards. I'm not a backwards looking guy.
Yeah, yeah. But it's significant. So again, thank you so much for that, Thomas. Thank you for sponsoring both TEDx TED Summit. So Steve, shall we move over to you?
Yeah, do it.
Sure. Yeah. For me, I think about this space, and we're in an interesting time where it's really getting hard to tell fiction from, reality. It's just, who would have thought that the pictures of astronauts, that the bottom one is actually from a movie and the top one is real. And the top one looks like they're wearing some motorcycle suits and random people. And it turns
Yeah.
out we've actually gotten to the point where we can simplify things that much, or flying cars in space, or whatever have you, or calls coming in where they're completely bots and video bots coming in. So that's what makes this kind of an interesting time, as Thomas mentioned. How do we associate trust with the information we're consuming? And that's what SCITT is fundamentally about, and we'll drill into the details. So this is one of the diagrams from the architecture doc, but we'll go into it a little more elaborate. And I found this on the market trends because I was trying to represent the amount of information that we're consuming is just growing at an exponential pace. And for all the new information we're consuming, we also need to know the old information, or the information coming from space, and all kinds of new ways of. It's not just even just our individual planet. Like we've got the Hubble and the Webb telescope and so forth, learning new information. But just to bring it back down to the telecom industry, I mean, how are we going to process all of these phone calls coming in if we have to have people on the calls to begin with, and then people listening in on the calls to make sure things are happening? So being able to automate those in a way where I can do a sentiment analysis and understand what's happening with my business, but done in a way that I actually trust the information. And then as it scales across multiple parties. So I'll take a little bit to describe SCITT and the elements, and hopefully you'll see that these kind of apply to the way we think about things in general in life. So first is just the slides of both vCon and SCITT are these IETF developing standards so that we can do interoperability across companies and across entities, in a means that we can focus on the unique segments of the customers without having to reinvent the wheel, and how do we move things forward. So in SCITT, we think of it as, who is making a statement about a thing, which is a pretty general thing. I could be talking about a movie. I could be talking about visiting an island, buying a stock, whatever those kind of things. Those are very general concepts. And unless you understand who the who is, it's really hard to put any weight into the information that's being represented. And volume of information does not necessarily justify quality, right? So a few people could be making very intelligent decisions about something where there's a whole bunch of noise, as we can see sometimes. Separating the signal to noise ratio can be difficult. So, and then it's also recorded at a certain point in time. My favorite movie, if somebody asked it, 20 years ago, would be a different than now, or the best, special effects, movie or whatever it might be. If somebody said the best special effects movie I've ever seen was Star Wars, in 1970 something, people like, but if it was known that was in 1980 or whatever, period back as opposed to now you've got context to it. So the time is also very important.
Yes.
But who are the who's, right? So it's not just the who's from Whoville, because those are some who's. Those are the people that could be making statements. So I might make a statement, Thomas, you might make a statement about some particular thing on what we know right now. But we also have services that are operating, right? We have the computers taking over the world. So we want to know which one of the identities. So we can put an identity on a particular node in a cluster. We can put it on a telco switch. We can put it in a car. Every one of those things can have an identity, so we can track how it was behaving, what was providing information, where the source was. So I have context to the information. So it's anything with any type of identity. It's not just any body.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll jump to, well, what is the artifact? Well, again, that could be anything I'm trying to make a statement about, including software, digital media, or a vCon. Now, what are statements? I like this movie. It was my best horror movie, or it was, here's some bill of materials around some software or hardware. Here's a model card about an AI. Might even be text messages or voicemail recordings. How do I know this voicemail is real, whether it's transcribed or not? Or updates about a vCon as the life of it travels through a workflow. Now, so what's interesting is most of what we just described is standalone. I create those statements and we sign those statements, and I'll walk through that in a second. But it's about recording those, right? If I have a contract with somebody and you and I agree to buy a house from Thomas, well, unless it's recorded, use notarized so that it's actually recorded in a ledger that, Alan and I bought this house. I don't know why Alan and I are buying houses with Thomas, but I know where Thomas lives and I want to buy his house and I might need some help from somebody. But that aside, the point is there's this notary that records the information around what was done.
Yeah.
And a receipt is issued. So we take this information, we put it in what's called a cozy envelope, which is a really concise format, which is really good for telcos as well as IoT devices, so that I'm not taking up a lot of space. And I can issue a receipt for what was done. If we crack open that SCITT payload, what we'll see is here's the issuer. And in my example, I use zTelco as the creator of the initial information. So as Thomas was talking earlier around who is the identity, right? Because if it's, Wabbit Networks that created this thing, I don't know if I trust them. But here's an issuer that provided that. The artifact is the vCon. So I'm using the vCon ID. And because SCITT is generic, we've actually prefaced with an identifier. So I know this is a vCon identifier. And then this is what gets really interesting. These are some new enhancements we've done with SCITT recently is make sure we're dealing with, I want to be careful. Detached is a very special meaning. It's payloads that are not in the SCITT envelope, because a vCon can be, if you take all the attachments with multi-gigabytes of long recordings, if we had a vCon for this whole session, for instance. So I don't want to put the vCon into the SCITT envelope. I want to make sure the SCITT envelope can reference the vCon. So we do what's called a hashed payload, and there's a draft specifically on this. And what we're doing there is we specify what the content type that we hashed was. So that's where the pre-image content type is the vCon. And then we take all of this information and put it in as a protected header. This is the stuff, the to be signed bytes, into a header. And then we take the hash of the vCon itself and put it as the payload. So now I've got this collection of information, including, you'll notice there's this vCon operation that says it's created, and it's a metamap. And then I'm saving that, and we take those two elements and we sign them. So this is putting an identifier on and a seal on that information to know it's not tampered. There's an unprotected header that I can also put additional information in. It's not signed, it's not protected, but you can put helpful information there as well. And receipts is one of the examples. So as Thomas has said, we really think about this as peanut butter and chocolate, or pick the two things that you want to add. And then, let's take a look at how we can, do this with vCons. And this is really kind of hot off the press. This is some stuff between Thomas and Cody from vCon GPT that we've been thinking about this. So we've got, Thomas's dealer network, and they're making phone calls out to consumers, such as this person, Gavin here. Gavin takes the call, and zTelco is facilitating this under the covers. Gavin doesn't need to know anything about it, but they create the initial vCon. It's just the recording and the parties of the call. And I bucketed this consent just to keep the payload simple here to fit on a screen. But they have consented to the call, and we have the two identities. That gets recorded because that vCon was created. That's a thing I want to be able to share, and I want to be able to say that this integrity is now sealed. And we'll notice that there's a hash of the vCon, which is the payload, and there's the identifier, which is duplicated here. So now I've got a correlation ID and I've got a version, and then I've got what was done, the create. So now that goes off to another company that's the data controller. They're the ones going to be the hoster of responsible for the information for the life of it. and they're going to modify the vCon because they're going to add a transcription. They'll add and these are the new bits, the license and consent lifetime are things we're experimenting with. That's what the star is on there.
Yeah.
But is this vCon meant for private use? So if you've got this and you can't claim where you got it from, then you're in violation. You're not supposed to have it. If it's licensed for public use, that's a different beast.
Yeah.
But it's licensed private, and we've making up this other thing that's got a consent lifetime of 15 days. So if you don't get an update or a confirmation after 15 days, then you could be in violation. And that gets recorded. So now I have a transcribe event operation that was put on the ledger, and now I know that has been sealed. And now this is the one I really like. What Thomas has been playing with here is kind of really fills a big hole that, we all have been through this case where we get a phone call and I say, don't ever call me again. And off into the circular can it goes. Yeah. Or I say, unsubscribe from this emails. And that tends to be a little bit more accurate, but I have no proof that I did unsubscribe from the emails, right? But what's interesting is they'll say, hey, it will take us maybe 24 to 48 hours to stop spamming you with emails, but then we should stop. So in this case, we can send a receipt, not in the CBOR format per se, but there's a receipt there that we can send in a human consumable way. I've got a link to that recording. I can hear what the call was. I can see who the parties were, and I can choose to continue consent or revoke consent, which we'll jump to that later. Okay, so now that is processed and now it's ready for usage. So now that vCon gets shipped to Stralid, and then they're going to go and put their business unique value on top of it. They're going to analyze sentiment for the type of call, because if it's a sport event, the loud voices might actually not be bad, right? So you have to understand the context to rate the sentiment. He'll take the phone numbers and turn it into actual leads. And of course, that's updated and has a new version. So that gets thrown on SCITT. So now we're starting to see, we can tell the history of this thing. And then Stralid's going to often do some amazing AI work and figure out how their dealers can process all this information, and additional phone calls go. And Gavin's like, this is great. Thank you. I've got a car now. I don't need you to call me anymore for this particular sales call. Call me for service. Call me because my son's now buying a car. But for this, the point is it doesn't have to be a do not call as a big blanket thing that we can't tell what they're. So I feel like that granularity is really important. So they call, and a new vCon is created that is a revoking of consent. And that's got a version. That's this 4 version. So now this is where it starts to get really interesting, because it's not just about logging the history of the vCons for auditing purposes for the sake of auditing, right? It's like making backups that you never actually need or test.
Yeah.
Here we can actively use this information because we've got the timer that says, let's say 15 days. And because the license was private and that was shared with Stralid, there's no ambiguity that when they took possession of this vCon, there's a license that says you must check back, within 15 days to make sure that that is still valid. Yeah. And if you do not call back, ignorance is not, passive for a law.
Yeah.
You have to call back. And because it's a private license, we know. So now we have the ability to do auditing and prosecution and whatever might be there, is to hold people accountable. Because we can't force Stralid to do the right thing, but we can hold them accountable.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, this same vCon could be shared with multiple people. This is what I really liked about the draft that Thomas and Diana have put together, because by identifying a data controller, it means that Gavin is working with that one entity, and wherever that thing gets shared, they have control over that, right? Yeah. If you've ever bought a house, you know that as soon as the thing is done, you get spammed, or you find out your Social Security information and your email was leaked from a company you never even heard of.
Yes.
Because that information was sold. So
yeah, exactly.
Really powerful. And if we pivot this slightly differently, we can start to see the importance of inclusion and consistency. So on SCITT, on the side there, we can see the series of statements that were recorded. And the initial one isn't super important because it went to the data controller, immediately was modified, and we don't need the other ones to have the initial one.
Mhm.
What we do want to make sure is they have the most current.
Yeah.
And we see that 2 was created, and then Starlet added 3, and 4 was created for the redaction, or the revoking of consent. And we can see that there's a bunch of them that are green, and the ZTelco is out of the picture. It doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
But Acme here is not current. And we can clearly see that there is a new version for that subject that they have not yet consumed. And depending on the time and the license, that may or may not be a problem yet. Likewise, if Wabbit Networks winds up with yet another vCon with a different version that we can't find anywhere, doesn't mean it's invalid, but it doesn't mean it is valid, right? It's like finding a stock tip on a piece of paper, on the street, or picking up a USB stick. So it's we don't know. We can't prove negative, but we can prove positive.
Yeah.
It might just be a point in time, or it might be that no, they're altering information and they're trying to play shady games there. So that's kind of how we think about them all coming together. The other one that came up it was a really good discussion was, well, in an immutable ledger, how do you manage PII information if it stays forever? So this is what's really helpful to kind of tear apart and diagnose and look inside the box of what does SCITT mean versus a holistic service. So we have this cozy envelope we've talked about before,
Yeah.
right? That's where all the information is packaged up, and it gets sent in to the SCITT service, and there's a registration process.
Oh, what does the acronym COSI mean?
Concise object signing and encryption.
Gotcha,
So it's
thanks.
sorry, I said concise.
Rolls off the
CBOR.
tongue.
It's CBOR, object signing and encryption, and the C in CBOR is concise. So CBOR is the binary format for storing information instead of like JSON or YAML. So it's much more condensed. No more do you have challenges of ordering and case sensitivity and all the other fun stuff.
Cool.
So that cozy envelope is very small, not to scale here, and it's sealed with a little stamp. And it goes into the SCITT registration, which will verify the identities are valid, and then notarize it to stamp it. Says, yep, I've checked, and this is good. What actually goes in SCITT is just hashes.
Yeah.
There is no PII information. It's a verifiable data structure of the hashes of the content. You can't ask SCITT for the current what was recorded. You can verify something was recorded, but I don't go to a notary and say, hey, give me the contract that you notarized. They don't keep it. So if we expand this out, right, like a mail server that just understands what a mail message is not a mail server, right? There's all the ancillary services that make the thing actually functional. So what we do at DataTrails, because we've been running the service for a while, is we pre-SCITT, is we have this concept called events. And what we're doing is we take that signed statement and we put it in the evidentiary data store. We take the meta map that's in the headers, which we're using for the vCon operation, and that information is persisted in this store separate from the ledger. The hashes of it are on the ledger, so we can record it.
Mm-hmm.
But the actual data that could have PII is not mutable. It is mutable. It is not immutable.
Yes.
And then what we'll do is we'll create indexes of all this information so that when queries come in, we can answer the questions around what is the collection of statements, what was the latest, what was a different, does this one exist, does this one not exist, which is obviously the opposite. So if we think about, first of all, SCITT does not store any PII information to begin with. So you don't have that problem. Other ancillary services can, and so we can delete that information. So the evidentiary store can be deleted, and those signed statements can be forgotten. The hash of them won't be. So
Yeah.
we can prove those existed. If somebody comes like, hey, you're not supposed to have this, but do you not have my information? You could say, well, we knew this was recorded at this point in time, but no, we don't have any information on it anymore.
Gotcha.
And then we can also, what's powerful is because we have all the access control work, we can also do redaction. So sometimes you can't delete something for legal reasons, but you have to mask it because it shouldn't be consumable unless, you're got a certain role.
Yeah.
So but if we take a look at the vCon scenario, what I showed there is literally all that we're recording. We might record like the library that was used and the version so we can do debugging, but there's no PII information. And the top three are part of SCITT. The last one is this meta map.
Yeah.
If we screwed up and we accidentally put the phone number in the revoke in the vCon operation, the hash is on the immutable ledger. The data would be in the evidentiary store. We could still redact it.
Yeah.
Sorry, we can still delete it or redact it. Actually, we can do either. But the point is that, even in the vCon scenario, there should never be any PII information that we would ever redact because that's all in the vCon itself. Yeah. So just kind of wrapping it up, we think about it as SCITT provides those standards for the who's and the statements and an artifact about a point in time. It's a way to provide collaborative and conflicting statements. So you and I could disagree about a movie we like, and Thomas could say, well, I find myself more consistent with Alan, so I'm going to discount Steve's opinion on this particular thing. But if we're talking about sailing, then, maybe Thomas takes my opinion versus you because you get seasick, whatever. The point is that for every scenario, we do this as humans and businesses all the time. Different companies will say this is good or this is bad, or a context. Asbestos, really good for fire suppression. Turns out not so good for cancer. That doesn't discount one or the other.
Yeah.
So these kind of things are really important to be able to track. And then at DataTrails, we provide the services atop that basic standard so that it's actually a fully functional service so that we can support things like vCons and the life cycle of those. And it's got all the indexing, it's got the access control, so we can do things like redaction, and all of those elements that make a product and a service and a platform more realistic. So that's kind of the talk, so to speak. But with with people here, I'd love to take on more questions because I'm sure Thomas can throw a whole bunch of ideas at this, and Alan, you as well.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Sebastian, if you have any input.
So mine straight away is the business model behind DataTrails.
Oh, was that the? Okay,
yeah, what's the business model?
Question. Yeah, so we work with partners like Thomas and Stralid and vCon GPT, and then we're providing those services as a platform to enable them. There are consumption models, there are tiers for that, but
Gotcha.
We're working to enable those platforms because that's the rich part that the rich and complex parts that we provide, and then we can work with Stralid and vCon GPT and Ringplan and all these other companies that they're providing their value, but they don't. You always want to try to build on the shoulders of giants, and this is how we're working.
Cool. Sebastian, I see you popped up. Do you have a question for Steve?
Yeah, it popped up. No question. I'm actually surprised. To see. So for me, the vCon, was so far a concept, and some things that I wasn't realizing that there are actually companies doing it already and using it. So it's quite interesting to understand a bit of the ecosystem and to see you guys being somebody that didn't just do a POC as it seems, but actually build a business, build something around it, and so it's really exciting actually to. And here I heard vCon GPT the first time now, so lots of things to follow up on.
Cool.
Well,
see, it's telco ready.
Great.
I feel like, and it's one of the reasons I really, just to touch on business model and businesses, I really do believe that listening to customers is such a differentiator in business. that you'd either have to decide to do it or not. And because of the sensitivity of the data that's involved, it's not an amateur job.
Yeah.
And I like to think a lot about maybe how medicine was before licensure. And this is maybe the same sort of idea because the biometrics of a person are ripe for abuse.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, and because I think that's true, I know we've had a lot of different work experience. One of the things I learned at Mindful was just how important the reputations of the brands are to the brands. Right? Brand reputation is everything. It's all
Yeah.
right. And vCons allow you to pay attention, and SCITT allows you to not get in trouble for paying attention. And just as a price that you might expect to pay for your doctor is the price you might expect to pay to listen to your customers. And that's really the core of it. And that's one of the reasons why you see vCons going everywhere, because there's a lot to listen to. And we talk about, the contact center use case because we're telephone guys. But there are, as we know from TADHack, there's factory floor use cases where there isn't a telco in sight.
Yeah.
Yet all these same things still exist.
Exactly.
Right to the fact that they were collected on a phone or collected in the shop floor. All the digital rights still apply. All of the damage and reputation makes a difference.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Yeah. So,
And I should thank you, Sebastian, for your vCon hack in demonstrating just how easy it
fun.
is.
Yeah, you had a fun. So yeah, and that
It
was
was short and tiny, but it certainly helped me as well to see how easy it actually is to produce them out of the data we have already as telcos anyway. Yeah, there was just some basic set of metadata, but with CPaaS, it's easy to add call recording with our toolchain that we have in place. We can do extract, as we said, sentiment, content, context from the calls, and immediately create that data set that you then, of course, need to protect and everything to make sure it's not just there, but it's actually used in the right way. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah. I loved how much. I loved how easy it was. I loved that was great. That was
and I think the most complex was setting up actually the conserver. Yeah, because getting that set up, getting the admin repository, linking the two together. But in the end, I had to shorten the video because of the time that we had. But I had like the AWS stuff was working, the Mongo stuff was all working. So even that was working without issues. Yeah.
great. Yeah. Good. All right. Well, there we go.
So that was great, Steve. I'm just amazed since you did the podcast only a few months ago, just how much the product has developed. So that's excellent work. Well done.
Yeah, just working. I can't repeat again of how great it is to work with the community of folks that we've been working with. Just the folks at Ringplan and zTelco and Strala, to just Thomas's engineers. Like Thomas is super busy, so sometimes I'll just ping one of his engineers and they'll get back to me and we'll make great progress. And it's just I think I spoke to 4 of them just yesterday, just fleshing out these decks, and then Diana for the comms group on how we're thinking about the legal aspects of it, because it's designing with privacy built in, designed with privacy is really important. So we don't try to bolt this on after the fact. The horses left the barn, now you're trying to control it. So this idea that you can specify a license associated with the vCon, so there's no doubt where it came from, and we can now understand how to process it. So it's a really fun space. I love being in this space.
Because one last question, because it's sort of like privacy first. You're doing it in the start. Security. It's a general question and may have already been answered, but what are the if somebody said, how secure is your solution? How would you answer that?
Well, I don't want to take the easy out, right? It's like fire safe is they're not fireproof.
Yes.
A fire safe is rated for a certain scenario. So you have to decide what is the kind of information you're trying to secure and how. Part of what we're doing with SCITT is making sure that when you have the information, you can verify what the source of it is, because a whole purpose of a vCon is it's meant for sharing
Yep.
amongst an audience that you want to share it
Yes,
with,
close
right?
user group. Yeah.
So you want to make sure, now for things like this, if there's a vCon for this is for public use. So there is a public license, so to speak, but most of them are private. But that's the point, is that you actually have the tools. We can sign the vCon itself, so we know the integrity of it. We can track the history of the vCon. That's where SCITT really kind of comes in, is that I could see there's multiple versions of that same vCon. So I think that's the way I would think about it, is with all of these kind of systems, it's not just securing the information itself through the services on the conserver and the vCon server and of course Stralin's platform as a whole, but can I validate the integrity of the information itself as it's shared?
Gotcha.
It's multidimensional.
Cool. No, that's great. Again, Steve, excellent presentation. Thank you so much.